Thank you all for coming. My name is Lynn McQuillan, and I'm with the Employee Wellness Center. I have been with the hospital for over 33 years, but for the last almost 19, I've been with the Employee Wellness Center. Wanted to try to come up with some subjects that maybe you aren't getting through the different education programs in Vitality and with Wellness Rewards. So I also teach yoga. And one of the things that we do when we're in a yoga class is I'll say to people, is there anything you want to work on or work toward? And almost every single class, people will say, ugh, my neck hurts and my back hurts. Can we do something about that? So with that in mind, I came up with today's topic, and it's about posture. So we're living in a society where our posture is becoming very much this all of the time. So we're going to look at what that can mean for us, and then first we're going to define, well, let's flip forward here to our goals for today. We're going to define what posture is, look at some of the different postural shifts and changes in the body, and then hopefully look at what can we do to maybe change some of that and get some of the that pressure out of the body. All right? So first of all, we're just going to look at the definition of posture, and it seems very simplistic, but I would like you to just sort of consider. Posture is the position in which you hold your body and your limbs in the three different alignments that basically we have. We have standing, we have sitting, and we have lying down, okay? To have good posture means that you need to be, and I think this is the key piece to this, and really toward anything that we're looking to bring about change for ourselves, is an awareness, all right? We need to have an awareness of how we're always, that's a huge thing, okay? But awareness of how we're holding ourselves in a way so that it puts the least strain on our back, on our spine, no matter what we're doing, all right? That makes sense? Pretty simple and, right to the point. So, considering though, today's modern society, the actions that we have, the activities that we have, the lives that we lead are very different from if we, rewound 100 years or so. People did much more physical labor. They were not in this forward posture all the time, okay? They were moving, they were lifting, they were bending, they were doing things. Today, almost everything we do in our daily activity is in a rounded forward posture. We get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we sit at the table, eat our breakfast, we drive our cars, we get to work, we sit humped over a computer, or even all the different activities within the hospital. We have people that work on computers, lab technicians, rounded forward, nurses and aides, rounded forward, people even serving the food, rounded forward. So we're looking at our daily activities in our work, and even in our just outside lives. So after we do these things all day, we go home and maybe we're fixing dinner, maybe we're doing these things. Most of us are at some point checking our phone, checking our emails, checking over computers. We're humped over computers and things like that. So a lot of our day, 8, maybe 10 hours of our waking day could be rounded forward, right? It's no surprise then that we have strain in the neck and in the back, all right? Does that make sense? Okay. So, as a result, modern lifestyles can lead to poor posture, which can cause muscle strains, tension, connective tissue, overall body imbalances, and misalignments. So that's structurally just the muscles and the bones, what's happening. But we can also even take it one step further and look inside. What might be happening then to the digestive and the respiratory parts of our body that could be turning into chronic health issues, all right? So this is our next step, but first, see, I love this slide, and nobody laughs at my slide about the mom. But anyway, mom said, stand up straight, sit up straight. Okay, so what can happen here clinically? And these are diagnoses that are starting to happen. Maybe they're because of posture, maybe they aren't, but let's just kind of think about it. So we can have headaches, shoulder pain, impingement, back pain, kyphosis, so that's just that rounded forward posture, herniated discs, abdominal pain. We can start to see some of the other things that can happen, gastrointestinal problems, reflux issues potentially, joint degeneration, tension in the muscles, and so on. So just to kind of give an example, we're going to do the shoulder, all right? So this many of us hold, and the shoulder is rounded forward. A good postural alignment, the ear should be directly over the shoulder, all right? Well, most of us, this is it. The ear's ahead of the shoulder and the shoulder is rounded forward. It starts to get locked down, the muscles get locked down, and it changes the dynamics of how we can move the arm in the socket, all right? So if we're rounded forward, we've changed how the bone of the arm sits in the shoulder socket. And when we lift that up, this is it. This is about all the range of motion I can get before I start feeling tension and tightness in that joint. All right, so the brakes are on. If this is all I have and I don't ever correct that and bring the shoulder back where I can get more mobility before I have a stop, that's a pretty big change, okay? But if I'm always this way and I'm here and I'm forcing that to go past where it is, there becomes a shearing and pain. Then that starts to turn into things like this, the joint degeneration. We're grinding, we're moving out of the natural range of motion that it was supposed to be. The muscles aren't firing the way they were intended to fire, and there's this trickle-down effect, okay? So that's kind of what we're talking about when we're saying we can start to see how the body changes just because the postural alignment isn't in a good posture. Does that make sense too? Okay. All right. So what is then a good standing posture? And what might be some of the deviations that we can see? So this second one in, it's as if you dropped a plumb line right straight down through the body. And really, I think the main thing for us to focus on is the center of the fulcrum, which is the pelvis, all right? So if the pelvis is in a good alignment and sitting the way it should be, and it's not disturbed by any muscles or connective tissues that are shortening or pulling it in any way, from there, the spine can sit on top well, and the legs can sit in the sockets as they should, all right? So everything stacks nicely. The spine was designed with all these beautiful natural curves in it so that it can right itself and be in a strong upright posture. When we change that and we sit like this, we've changed the dynamics of all of these guide wires that come in, aka our muscles, our connective tissues. They're fighting to bring us back to what's a righted posture, an upright posture. So that's where we start to feel the strain. This thing's just, spineless thing won't sit up. All right, so what are some of the ones we can see? Well, we see rounded forward postures. We said the ear is in line over the shoulder. We can see how the back has changed, the head is forward, and then we start to see down the chain how things have to change. So we look here, we can see the back of the spine, or the back of the spine is tipped. Boop. And that's going to change how the pelvis sits, so now the spine can't sit well in there. It's also going to change how the legs are aligned. You can see now the bones have even kind of shifted a little bit. So could our posture be causing knee pain? Maybe, maybe not. Same thing here, now we've got the pelvis tipped back, all right? So you can see how the back of the pelvis is lifted, or the spine is lifted, and now it's tucked under, the pelvis is tucked. We've got the knees locked. Now we've got a whole lot of pressure in there too. Same thing over here, now we've got things shifted and the bones aren't even aligned. The kneecap is shifted a little bit. We've lost all the natural curves in the spine. So all I'm trying to say is these kind of things play out. If we take it from here, it plays out to the ends of the torso, okay? And it's gonna change the dynamics of how the body holds itself. So this slide up here is just showing us if the pelvis tips this way, it changes the spine. If the pelvis tips this way, it can change the spine. Things can shift front to back. So we said there were three ways that we hold ourselves. We stand, we sit, and we lie down. So when we're standing, obviously the foundation is our feet. When we sit, the foundation should be these bones in our butt, which they've actually been called our sit bones, or sits. Sometimes you'll see it with a S or a Z. But often, we are not sitting on those bones. We're mostly sitting with them in front of us. And then Again, the pelvis is the center. So if everything sits here, if this is not where it needs to be so the spine can sit directly on top of the pelvis, if the pelvis is this way, the spine wants to try to fix itself. And so it can't get upright, so it goes this way. All right? This is us. Put your limbs and your head on here, and here you are, most of us, sitting. Okay? And then we wonder why we've got some strain and pain. And this is where we'll most commonly see the areas of that strain or pain come up. Can we relate? Wrist, neck, back, shoulder. Here we are, almost, you know, more than half. Shoulders back. So there, right there, those are those people that are coming into the yoga class. Oh, my neck hurts. Oh, my back hurts. Just real quick, we're going to look at two different kinds of situations that are created with this rounded forward posture, and one of them is called an upper cross syndrome. Are there any PT people? No? Okay. So this is everything stacked well, okay? We can see there isn't really any strain. Everything's sitting the way that it should. Everything's balanced coming in to hold. When we have the head then shifting forward a little bit, the ear in front of the shoulder, now we see that these diagonal lines, think about, if you think of like those towers, those big tall towers that they put the wireless phone, you know, those super big tall towers. There's the 4 points, you know, they're wide at the bottom and they go up, but they have crisscrosses the whole way down. And they need the crisscross to have the integrity from those sides to stay stable. So even with a little bit of movement, they'll still maintain. If we pull one of them off, the whole thing is compromised. Yeah? Does that make sense? So that's what we're looking at here. If our body is made up of crisscross patterns to stay upright, and we change them, and one is pulled more to the front or more to the back, something has to give. So if something is tight, something else is overstretched. Something is tight, something else is overstretched. So now we can see there's imbalances between front and back. And that is going to cause our problems. So where do we see it show up? That's what these fun little like me, they look like they hurt. But you'll start to see things showing up in places where if we had it all stacked well, we wouldn't have that, okay? So upper cross syndrome is basically things are all pulled forward. And this is just to drive it home. We got one more slide. But I'm trying to take the layers, excuse me, and peel ourselves in to really understand. So if the muscles on the front, the pectorals, these muscles are like fan-shaped muscles, usually they're pulling the shoulder forward. That's going to be tight here. That's going to cause tightness in the back of the neck, but then the front of the neck becomes weak because it's not back where it belongs. The back of the body is weak because it's overstretched, because the head's hanging forward. So what does that look like even one more layer in? If the head is ideally positioned over the shoulders, the muscles here are pink equally. So everything's working the way it's supposed to. It's equally distributing everything that it needs to balance. But when we constantly have the head forward, now we can see that there's strain on the muscle in the back of the neck. Maybe now you're going to get some pain here, and we saw how that can show up as headaches and shoulder pain. And now we're going to see some imbalances here because these muscles aren't working as much and this one's working too much. Okay? So, excuse me, there's actually a term now called tech neck or text. Sometimes it's called text neck. But it's actually and I show my age a few times with this, but I say it's an ICD-9 code, and it's like, no, it's ICD-10 now. But it's a code. There's a code for this. What's fascinating, I thought, when I started looking into this, the average human head weighs 10 to 12 pounds, they say. As it begins to shift forward, the weight of the head doubles, triples, and so on. So that, I mean, anybody have teenage kids? No, just me. Okay. Does this look familiar? I mean, This is our next generations. They're going to have serious issues. At least we had a start without that. Now we're just that way now. But we're looking at really creating a lot of strain and problems. With 60 degrees forward, the head can weigh up to almost 60 pounds. That's a lot of weight for little tiny muscles on your neck to hold your melon up. All right? Then the other thing that they're talking about, and we don't have to worry because we all text like this with our fingers. These kids, they're having thumb issues. We're safe though, right? Because I can't do that with my thumbs. All right. This slide, I'm trying to show that it's never one place. Our pain, our strain is never just one thing. We can never say, oh, if I fix that, everything else will be fine. Everything is spread out throughout our kinetic chain. We have layers of fascia, the layer underneath the skin of connective tissue that actually starts at the sole of the foot, wraps all the way, the back line they call it, starts down there, wraps all the way up the entire back side of the body and actually attaches to the front of the forehead. So if there's strain here, if I've got too much strain here, something else has to be giving down here. It can never be just one place because we're connected from top to bottom. All right. Okay, so that's the upper body. Then we have the lower half. What's the other thing that we do a lot of during our day? You're all doing it now. We sit. We sit. We sit probably more than we stand. Laying down depends on when you go to bed. But what happens if we sit too much? It's the same thing. We still need that balance between front to back, but if we sit too much, the hip flexors, which are located on the front here, they attach to the thigh and they come up in and attach not only to the pelvis but up into the spine. But if they're short, they're going to tip the pelvis, you're going to lengthen the back, or vice versa. If it's the other way around, we can be tight back here and then we're overstretching here. So we can get weak abs, so the abs go, they don't have to engage so much. The glute doesn't have to do much, okay? There's actually a term called glute amnesia, like dumb butt. It doesn't have to fire, it doesn't have to do what it was intended to do because other muscles are taking over. And then it's not working the way it was supposed to. So this can cause a problem. So gee whiz, if we're tight at the bottom and we're tight at the top, we got some problems that we're dealing with here. All right? So what is our hip flexor? This is just to kind of give you a picture of what that is and how it could affect you. So this is the bone coming into the hip right here. We have these two muscles that work in conjunction as the hip flexor, but they're attached to the thigh bone. They attach into the pelvis, and then they attach also into the spine, about midway up. All right? So if this is short, though, think about what that does. If it's short and it's attached to your spine, maybe it's pulling forward this way. And if it's short down here in the pelvis, it's pulling maybe this way. Depends. It's going to depend on your body and, whoops, and your imbalances. And I just want to be clear, these are on both sides. This is just a picture for showing you the difference between the two. So again, just getting into then what's underneath that muscle. We have the thigh bone. But also, if we've got some tightnesses in here, maybe that's showing up in that duck foot posture that we see. We can have the muscles and the bones being misaligned just because of that. So here we are again, just like we said in the shoulder, if the shoulder out of alignment isn't moving as it's supposed to, if the hip out of alignment isn't moving as it's supposed to, maybe there's undue strain and stress in the hip. There's definitely undue strain in the knee because it's not in alignment with the hip the way it's intended to be. What do we hear a lot about replacements? Hips and knees, okay? So where did it come from? Why did that happen? Hard to know 100%, but maybe it's coming from some things like this. So this last little photo here is just, again, just trying to really drive the point home. But when things are tight, they're going to pull and shift from the normal balanced posture. So if something's tight this way, something's going to pull to compensate. The body is so intelligent. It wants to fix itself. It wants to correct itself. It will do its best, but it can only do so much. All right? Okay. Making sense? Okay, thank you. So that was the musculoskeletal, the physical stuff. Let's kind of move inward then. So we realized that the outside stuff can be affected, but then what happens on the inside? So one of the last thing we do in this world, we breathe, okay? And in between, we take a whole lot of breaths. But what's the quality of our breathing? If we are rounded forward, if we have this upper cross syndrome, and our lungs need space to fully expand and contract, and we're collapsed in, if I take a full breath, it's quite challenging, and my lungs don't have the room to move. Just even sitting up straight, and you can even just visually see, and if you try it yourself, you'll definitely feel a change between the two. So taking that deep, full breath brings down that fight or flight, gets the parasympathetic nervous system to let your body and your brain realize that there is an unnecessary strain or stress on you. But if we're here and all we do is little shallow breathing, mostly just because we don't have the space, the body reads this potentially as stress. It's that fight or flight that when we're in trouble, we do. So if all we ever do is little short, shallow breathing, maybe the body's misinterpreting that as there's a problem, and we can't ever get out of that stress mode. So it's kind of interesting to even play those two things together, posture and breathing, with stress. So that's just our breath work. But then on top of that, one of the other things, what do we hear? I mean, is those of us that are working with people and they're coming in and they talk to us about their health issues, a lot. Irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis, gastric reflux, all those things. And yes, the foods we eat and stress can be a factor, but what if we considered, is it maybe that we are not giving these organs the space they need to function at their highest capacity? Think about a garden hose. If you have water running through it and the hose is laying with plenty of room and it's not kinked or coiled, everything's fine. But the minute you put the tiniest little kink in that hose, you see a change in what comes out the other end. This is the most sophisticated hoses you're ever going to see. And if we're kinking them or pressing on them or collapsing in on them all the time, could there be some complications or problems coming up? It's a consideration. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But I just think, like, if there isn't enough space for all this stuff to work, how's the stuff going to get through? It's just going to get stuck in there and hang out longer than you want it to. And I know you're eating lunch, so we won't go into that. All right? So just a consideration, it's not just the outside stuff. This can also be affecting the inside as well. So a lot of interesting things to think about. Now, we'll never ever read this slide on here. You've received these as handouts, and I'm not going to go into all this, but this is for you to take home should you care to explore this any further or deeper. They're actually, I said this in one of the other programs, and someone there had just quit smoking. She was like, ugh, I'm doomed. But they're saying that sitting is the new smoking, that it's as dangerous to your health to sit for long periods of time as it is if you smoked, okay? So get up, move. Most of you are Vitality, so a lot of you have the tracking devices. If you haven't already set yours every hour to tell you to get up and move, I would really strongly suggest that you do that. I don't know, whatever works for you. For myself, I have mine set for 10 till, and if I haven't taken 250 steps, it, bzz, bzz, get up, move it. So that's something to consider. And even if it just means that you stand up and just, move in place. Maybe you can't get away from wherever you are, but even just getting up and moving the body, getting things circulating, get the blood moving, even if it's just shifting your hips or, think about that lower cross and the upper cross. Start to open things up, okay? Just move around a little bit. All right, so what can we do? Some things, do most of you have seated jobs? Jobs where you're sitting? No, you're more standing. Okay. For those that might be at a desk, consider, number one, even what are you sitting on, okay? Does it have good lumbar support? The guy on the blue here has some nice lumbar support, which is going to allow even just that gentle pressure into the low back forces the pelvis to not be. You can't have that lumbar curve and still sit behind your sitting bones, okay? So when we bring that lumbar curve in, it forces the spine to get back into a natural alignment. It also forces the pelvis to get down into or onto the sitting bones. From there, I have issues with this because I'm short. But my chair, in order for my chair to be high enough to be at my desk so I have good arm alignment, my legs hang down. I'm too short, so I dangle. Well, that puts strain on your hips too. So I have a little plastic thing underneath my desk that, my little booster, my booster seat for my feet, but I put my feet on that, which brings my knees up. Think 90-degree angles, okay? So you want 90 degrees in your hips and 90 degrees in your knees, and then even potentially 90 degrees in your ankles, okay? Now, if you're standing a lot, that can put strain into the hips and the knees. I've seen it suggested that you get like a little stool or a platform and you just put one foot up on it just to get some of the weight out of the pelvis that's, instead of it being like down into both hips. Okay? So careful. This isn't a good example here because he's still looking down, but maybe you need to elevate, excuse me, whatever it is you're looking at. So put a surface, something underneath here. Lift this up so it's more in line with the eyes so you don't have to look forward. Or even just straining. Now with this posture down, the other thing that's happening now, he's down here so that his head's here, but then probably the eyes are lifting up. So now we're straining even the muscles inside the head, potentially. Cause headaches. So we got all kinds of things happening that could be causing us problems. So just sort of think about, do you look more like this or do you look more like that? Regardless, if you're sitting, take breaks. Take breaks and move. And sometimes if you're dealing, when you're doing something that you're really focused on, an hour can fly by without you even thinking about it. So those little reminders can help you to really remember, oh my gosh, I need to move my body. So think about how have you been, and then how can you reverse that to help bring that balance back into the body. Just consider your curves. How are you sitting? And then can you change that so that you can have the best posture to create space to be able to take deep breaths and to let your organs function at their highest capacity. Something to consider here is just even when we sit, are we crossing our legs? I was having some low back pain and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from until I realized that every time I sat down, I tucked one leg under. Mostly because, again, I'm short and I'm always trying to get myself higher so I can see things better. But I would tuck one leg under. Well, with one leg tucked under, if we think about that, if the leg comes up in here, it's pulling one hip down, one hip's coming up. That means some muscles are tight, some muscles are overstretched, and if I sit like this too long, everything's all out of whack. So just consider, how are you sitting? And someone said in one of these, they said, so I should never cross my ankles? And I said, well, no, you don't. It's never, never. But you don't want to sit for long, long, long periods of time, okay? The other thing to consider here too, and these are just to give examples because sometimes that's the best way to really drive some of this home. My brother was having issues with his back. And so we talked over the phone. He lives in Maryland. Talked over the phone and talked about all these different stretches and strengthening exercises to try and help him with his back. Months and months, he even went to PT for a little bit. Nothing seemed to be working. He kept having back pain. So when I got to the point where I was able to visit him, and I said, well, let's talk a little bit. Like, what the heck are you doing? Why is this not working? Something should be working. And then we looked at it and realized he had two businesses, and he drove a lot back and forth between the two. And he had a big fat wallet that he put in his back pocket all the time. And it's similar to what I just said with me tucking my leg. That wallet was enough to knock his hips out of being level. And as he drove, everything got out of whack. So he stopped doing that. He started putting his wallet in the hickey thing. And his back it got better. He loses his wallet now, but his back's better. So just think, if something isn't working that should be working, awareness, right? We said the key to all of this is awareness. We need to be aware, and we said in that first slide, aware all the time what is going on in our body to allow it to be in the least amount of discomfort. Okay? So finally, some ways to change all of this or bring about some stretching or release for us. And I was so excited. I found this online, and I had no idea she'd be animated when I got her going up here, except she gets really annoying after a little bit, so we won't stay here too long. But she is sitting on her sit bones. You know, sometimes we have to scoot out to the edge because when we're way back here, it's too easy to be real relaxed. So sometimes, you know, just come out to the edge of your chair, sit up straight, and just start to move the rib cage. So we said the shoulders can get locked down. The ribs have lots of little tiny interconnective tissues and ligaments and things like that, and they can get short and actually pull your rib cage down. Think about these poor little old people that we see in the grocery store pushing their grocery cart. You know, they're literally, their bodies are so locked down, and then God love them, they don't want to drink water because they're afraid then they'll have to go to the bathroom. So now they're dehydrated. They're like little crumpled over dehydrated sponges walking along in the store. And, you know, same thing. They're rounded forward, so then they got to get their head up, and then they're going to have neck pain, and then they have eye strain. Oh, my. Just stand up straight, sit up straight. Okay. So move your rib cage. That's what it was supposed to do. It gets locked down, it gets tight, and now you can just see even that compresses the organs. So key though, and this goes back to the whole shoulder thing. Yes, it's great to stretch, but you don't want to stretch in poor alignment. So if we're trying to really open up the muscles that attach from the chest up into the shoulder, this is not doing that. It's not getting it done. So sitting rounded and just leaning forward, all I've done is move my body in space. So if I'm here, I need to move something that I'm trying to change. And this is what I'm trying to change. We're going to roll that back and then lean forward. Okay? So just make sure that you get it the best alignment you can before you take yourself into the stretches. And I'm just trying to show different ways to do the same thing. So she's getting a side body stretch just like she's getting a side body stretch. She's just on the floor. So if you've got some low back tightness, we can use our chairs, we can use a desk, she's got a rolly cart, I'm not so sure. Don't get holding on to things with wheels. Hold on to things that are going to stay put, all right? But just move your back. Just stand over top of something and, you know, round your back, straighten it. Think about cats. Think about animals. They very organically move. Does everybody have pets? Somebody have something? But they, you know, they move, they stretch, they move their spines. So that's going to help us with the whole back. Here we're seeing this gentleman in a chair. If you've been sitting for a long time and you're getting some tightness in your hips, just scooch out to the edge. We're showing here he's got good spinal alignment, but we said that the hip flexor attached into the spine, so we're anchoring that point, but we're asking the leg, it comes down and attaches to the thigh. We're asking that leg to pull back and lengthen that muscle out and stretch it. Feels really nice. Low back stretch, or if you have sciatic problems, this is a really good stretch to do for that. Careful that when you lift your leg up, you turn it in the hip socket, okay? We don't ever want the hip to stay put and then torque the knee, all right? So we lift up and we externally, we roll that hip open and then place it on there and then lean forward. And how that works for the sciatic is when we lean forward, the trick to this one, the body will take the path of least resistance most of the time. All right, so if I'm on the edge of my chair, feel free to try this if you'd like. Nobody ever does, but please feel free to do that. You're going to lift that leg up, move it in the hip socket, and then come back up on top of those sit bones. All right? What will tend to happen is it's easier to go like this, right? Because we spend most of our day like that. So our body's used to this, no problem. And then we go, you know, people say, I don't feel a stretch. Well, that's because you didn't move anything that would stretch. So with your back in that alignment, you tip forward from the pelvis, and that is going to stretch the muscles in the low back and down. You're tipping the pelvis. That attaches into the muscle on the back of the leg, that sit bone, okay? Which will relieve the sciatic, okay? So that's a good one. He's probably not the best example, but flat back, lean forward, okay? All right, so neck, shoulders, up in the corner, just move things. If you've been sitting static for a long time, just lift and lengthen side to side. And what I'd really encourage, if you're comfortable with doing it, is when our eyes are open, we have that sensory available to us, and that's a good thing. But when we can close our eyes, we can start to bring the sensory inward and get a little bit more connected to what's really happening in our body because we've taken away what we're looking at. So if you're comfortable with closing your eyes, try some of these stretches. You know, again, you want to make sure that you're in a good postural alignment. And then close your eyes and just lower and feel what's happening. Don't think. You don't have to think at all. So that's awesome, right? You don't have to think at all. Just move. Let your body very organically start to move. It wants to move. Our bodies were built to move. They are the most complicated machines out there, and they're supposed to move and stretch and go in all directions, but we get locked down in these forward movement patterns, and we lose some of this other capacity. So lift and lower, side to side, turn your head, and just notice, does one side feel a little tighter than the other? And then you can start to pay attention. There's a lot of females in here. Do you carry a heavy bag on one shoulder? Right? We do that. We all sling them up over the side, and then to get it to stay there, you go like this, and then this hip goes, and then now you're walking like this. You know, and then we go, I have no idea why my back hurts. Well, okay. You know, or do you have a job where you're on the phone? You're talking like this with the phone or something. Awareness. Okay, start to think about how do we do things. I catch myself all the time driving in my car, one leg just kind of hanging out to the side because I don't have a clutch. So little things like that, because that's going to pull your pelvis, that's going to pull your spine, and things have to correct themselves. Simple stretches for the neck, and I love these with the towel. If you do have a lot of neck strain or pain, using a towel, the way she's got this here, it's almost like it becomes like a little traction for you. You just put some gentle pressure on it and then lift. So if you think, if you're this way and you're overstretched, you want to take the head back, but we said the head weighs 10 to 12 pounds. That's a lot of weight to be controlling. And if those muscles have been really overstretched, they're going to be challenged to fire and hold you well. So you're really asking them to do something difficult. So let there be some support so that you can actually just let that head kind of fall back and be supported with the towel versus the muscles having to go and hold your head up. All right? These are just some nice stretches. If you don't have towel with you, then try it without. You know, if you find that you're a little bit tight on one side, just gently pull here and then see what happens in this shoulder. I just caught myself. It just wanted to come with me. Path of least resistance. Think about it. Let that shoulder come down, and then you want to lengthen away. and just rock and move. Okay. You can also use the towel to open up the chest. This is a great way to get different mobility through the shoulder. One shoulder's turning in, one shoulder's turning out. So really nice stretches there. This one overhead, big stretch. All this stuff is functional movement too. We need to be able to lift our arms behind us. We need to be able to move side to side, dry our back, put our clothes on, things like that. And then that is just a nice, like if you want to just totally shut it down, shut the world out, lay down. It's in yoga, that's called child's pose. Okay. All right, finally then, a little bit more stretches for the back. This is a really nice stretch for standing. I just want to caution that when we do this, we want to be very careful. Most of us have heard about the SI joint. That's this joint space right here where the big base of the spine comes and sits between the pelvis. Please be careful that the hands are not pushing directly on this joint space, okay? Stay out here where it's fluffy and safe, okay? So, and that's actually, I use, I'll say the term, put it on the fluffy stuff, roll your shoulders back and down, and lift, okay? We never want to place the hands here and push forward, okay? That's going to cause more trouble than do good. So if you're not sure if you're doing that, then don't even stick your hands on there. Then just take your hands behind. But not everybody can do that. So then you can bring in your towel if your hands don't go all the way behind you. Grab your towel and just walk your hands in as close as they'll go and lift your chest. This is just showing you that lateral movement from a standing position. And then if you want to really let gravity work in your favor, just lay on the floor. If you have neck strain, if you've been head forward, it sounds like it's going to be easy to lay on the floor. It may not be. I have a gentleman that actually he's a physician at the hospital. He comes to yoga classes regularly, but he is this way all the time. And when we ask him to lay on the floor, it is painful for him to get his head back. You can see the strain on the front side of his neck. So we roll up a blanket and we put it underneath and take that out. Take out the stuff that hurts and fill in the space. Think of it that way, just fill in the space. And eventually the body's going to be able to relax and get back into a normal pattern. Finally then, these are just options for you. I know you're not going to try this here, but if you get home, you want to try some things. We're taking things forward flexion, we're twisting the spine, it's meant to do that, and then we're putting it into extension. Really safe ways for you to bring movement into your spine. These are actually things that if you did go to a yoga class or something, you would do these almost always in every class. This is called cat and cow, but spinal mobility, and then opening up the pelvis, but we're very supported. This is the same thing that we saw that girl doing in the picture, but now we have all these points of contact with the floor to really support us in what we're doing. Okay, so just lots and lots of different options. You made it. Good job. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time and your attention.